The story begins in the city of Valencia, where such heavy rain was pouring that the streets of the entire city were jammed with traffic. All the vehicles were stuck in one place, and ordinary people were stranded there. Meanwhile, the radio was broadcasting news of a massive incoming storm. The government had advised people to stay in one place for their safety. Among these vehicles was a car belonging to a woman named Sandra, who was actually the manager of Valencia Bank. She called a man named Antonio and asked if his name was on the list of people being sacked from the bank. Antonio told her that he hadn't received any information yet. Sandra then said that even if his name appeared on the list, Antonio must keep it a secret. Finally, Sandra got out of her car and reached the bank, where she asked the staff if they had activated the bank's alarms. A man named Mahi informed her that due to the bad weather and traffic jams, the staff hadn't yet arrived at the bank. He added that they hoped the weather would clear up by noon, and then they would get all the work done. Just then, an employee noticed that Sandra seemed a bit distressed. Mahi revealed that Sandra's name was indeed on the list of people being sacked from the bank. Meanwhile, when Sandra went to her office, she called Antonio again and found out that her name was truly on the list. This meant her job was as good as gone. Hearing this, Sandra became deeply disheartened. At that very moment, a group of armed gangsters suddenly attacked the bank. Some of them were carrying bombs. They were also wearing jackets and quickly intimidated all the officers with their guns. Meanwhile, Sandra was in her office, talking to her relative Walken. She asked Walken for help to save her job, but Walken clearly told her that he couldn't do anything about it. At that very moment, a thug named Gallego, along with his accomplice Jack, suddenly barged into her office. They tied Sandra's hands and feet and took her hostage. After that, they started using their tools to break into the bank's vault to steal the money. Alongside this, they began digging a tunnel underground, through which they planned to smuggle all the stolen loot out of the bank. On the other hand, the gang's leader, Uruguayo, was controlling everyone in the bank, ensuring that no one outside got wind of the robbery. But then he suddenly realized that someone had pressed the office's alarm button. Seeing this, Uruguayo turned red with rage and brutally beat the man who triggered the alarm. He then threatened to blow up the entire bank with bombs. A girl pleaded with him not to detonate the bombs, saying, "My son is alone at home, waiting for me. Please have mercy." Uruguayo told the girl, "Call your son. I'm giving you 5 minutes." He then gave all the hostages 1.5 minutes to talk to their families. The truth, however, was that Uruguayo was only trying to scare them. In reality, he had no intention of taking anyone's life. Meanwhile, on the other side, very soon, the police received the alarm signal and realized that robbers had infiltrated the bank. Detective Domingo called the bank's number, and one of the thugs picked up, warning that if the police tried to interfere before their objective was complete, they would kill all the hostages. The robbers then demanded a car and a plane from the police in exchange for the hostages' lives. However, Detective Domingo responded that he couldn't make such a decision alone and would need permission from a higher-ranking officer. Meanwhile, Gallego informed his boss that the tunnel they had dug for their escape had filled with water due to the heavy rain. They decided to wait half an hour for the water level to subside. During this time, Sandra told Gallego that she was being sacked from her job. She then suggested that he rob a particular vault, as it contained a secret so valuable that it could change their lives if revealed. However, Sandra set a condition. She would only reveal the details of this special vault if Gallego agreed to give her a share of the money. On the other hand, we see a politician named Johns, who was currently in a coma in a hospital. His wife, Mariana, was by his side when she saw the news of the bank robbery on TV. She immediately panicked and called Detective Julio to ask if the news was true. Julio replied that he hadn't received any such information yet. Mariana then revealed that her husband, Johns, had a special vault in that bank, and if anyone managed to open it, Johns would be in grave trouble. Julio tried to calm her down and assured her that he would personally investigate the matter. He then called Officer Ferron and relayed everything Mariana had told him. Julio mentioned that he didn't know what was in the vault, but whatever it was highly confidential. Meanwhile, we see Sandra showing Gallego a video on a screen in which Johns was heading toward the security deposit vault with a hard disk in his hand, which he was about to place inside the vault. Sandra revealed that a few years ago, a detective had exposed Johns' scam, which had landed him in deep trouble. At that time, the entire country was condemning him. To cover his tracks, Johns had stored all the evidence of his misdeeds and details of the government officials who had supported him in the scam on that hard disk, which he then placed in the bank's vault. In exchange for revealing the vault's number, Gallego gave Sandra some priceless diamonds stolen from the bank. After receiving the diamonds, Sandra disclosed that the vault's number was 314. Meanwhile, Uruguayo called Detective Domingo and demanded that food be sent to the bank. He warned, "Don't make the mistake of tampering with the food because I'll feed it to the hostages first before eating it myself. Understood?" Sometime later, Gallego noticed that the water level in the tunnel was rising again. He immediately told his accomplices that they needed to complete their mission as quickly as possible and get out of there. By this time, the police had surrounded the bank from all sides. The robbers then took some of the bank's employees and forced them to wear jackets rigged with bombs, threatening that if they moved even slightly, the bombs would explode. Meanwhile, Gallego reached the area where the safety deposit boxes were kept. He told his accomplice that John's box was number 314. Hearing this, his accomplice suspected that Gallego was deceiving them, believing he had come to the bank solely to steal this one box. He was about to tell the rest of the gang that Gallego had ulterior motives when Gallego explained that Sandra had told him about this box. Despite this, the rest of the gang insisted that before the tunnel filled with water, they needed to enter it immediately. All the robbers carrying bags filled with loot quickly descended into the tunnel. The last robber used a sturdy rope to drag a table over the tunnel's entrance, sealing it shut. One of the men went alone to the end of the tunnel to check if they could swim out, but within moments he started struggling to breathe and returned to his companions, warning them that the water current was too strong. Ultimately, they decided to return to the bank. With all their strength, they pushed the table away from the tunnel's entrance and re-entered the bank. At the same time, the police were preparing to storm the bank. Domingo called Uruguayo and informed him that the food had arrived outside and he needed to open the bank's door. One of the robbers went to open the door, and at that moment the police were positioned near the wall, ready to rush in. But just as the door opened, the police suddenly received an order to abort the mission. As a result, they had to pull back at the last moment. In reality, John, along with the corrupt government officers, were gathered, trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. It was then revealed that one of the officers had secretly assigned Uruguayo the mission to steal John's hard disk from the vault to protect himself. This enraged Ferran and his colleagues, as the officer had made this decision without consulting anyone, committing a grave mistake. They decided to seek help from a detective named Pablo, as they had complete trust in him. They tasked Detective Pablo with retrieving the hard disk from the robbers and delivering it to Ferran. Meanwhile, the robbers calculated that as long as they had John's box, they were safe and could use it to blackmail the officers. When Uruguayo learned that Sandra had told Gallego the box's number, he realized that Gallego must have given her something valuable in return. Furious, he stormed off and began pounding on the bathroom door where Sandra was hiding. Losing his temper, Uruguayo attacked Sandra, demanding to know what she had received in exchange for revealing the box number. But soon Gallego arrived and started fighting with Uruguayo. In reality, Gallego was angry because Uruguayo had kept the information about the valuable box a secret from the rest of the gang. When Uruguayo entered the bathroom, he found a bag of diamonds, but it was empty. This infuriated him further, as he realized that Gallego had given Sandra diamonds instead of money. He told the rest of the gang that Sandra had swallowed the diamonds to prevent anyone from taking them. Meanwhile, we see a thug named Loco trying to extract the files hidden on the hard disk. However, he encountered a chess game with a puzzle. As soon as he made a wrong move, all the data on the hard disk automatically deleted. He tried desperately to recover the data, but it was no use. Shortly after, Detective Pablo took charge of the case and called the bank. Uruguayo answered the phone. The police had surrounded the bank from all sides, and Uruguayo was furious because escaping was now nearly impossible for his gang. Pablo declared that he would handle the case from now on and expressed his desire to meet Uruguayo in person, as he was the gang's leader. Uruguayo refused, fearing the police would kill him. But when Pablo promised that no one would shoot him, Uruguayo reluctantly agreed to meet at the bank's entrance. When Uruguayo stepped outside to meet him, Pablo said he would help him escape, but in return, Uruguayo would have to follow all of Pablo's orders. When Uruguayo returned to the bank, he told his gang that Pablo was going to help them escape. However, his accomplices grew suspicious, thinking it could be a police trap. Uruguayo then explained that Pablo's plan involved going to the fourth floor of the adjacent building and entering a flat through a window. There, they would find police uniforms, which they would wear to escape immediately. After this, Loco informed Uruguayo that due to his mistake, all the data on the hard disk had been wiped. Hearing this, Uruguayo was furious and brutally beat Loco. Just then, Gallego arrived and tried to calm Uruguayo down, but when he learned the truth, he too attacked Loco. They realized that their last means of leverage had slipped from their hands. Nevertheless, following Pablo's instructions, they quietly made their way to the adjacent building, where one of Pablo's men was already waiting for them. They quickly put on the police uniforms. Suddenly, Gallego struck Pablo's man on the head, knocking him unconscious. They then fled without informing Pablo, ensuring no one would know that the hard disk was empty. Taking Sandra and Toy with them, they reached the entrance of the building, where they encountered police guards. Before letting them pass, the guards asked for their IDs. When questioned about Sandra, Gallego claimed they had found her on the 5th floor. However, the police grew suspicious and stopped them from leaving. At that moment, Uruguayo and his gang pointed their guns at the police, who responded by drawing their weapons. Instantly, a fierce shootout erupted between the two groups. In the chaos, Sandra was shot in the arm. Gallego and Uruguayo quickly carried her to a safe corner of the building. They felt terrible for Sandra and decided to leave Sandra behind to ensure her life wouldn't be in further danger. Uruguayo told Sandra to stall the police for as long as possible and then bid her goodbye before he and Gallego left. Uruguayo then called Pablo, who told him he would have to face the consequences of his actions. Pablo urged him to surrender to the police, but Uruguayo flatly refused, threatening that if he and his gang weren't provided with a getaway vehicle within half an hour, they would start killing a hostage every 15 minutes. After the call ended, Pablo spoke with Julio and instructed him to handle the situation wisely. He knew this gang was extremely dangerous and had never failed in their plans. Pablo emphasized that they needed to save the hostages' lives while getting the gang out of the bank. Meanwhile, Uruguayo and Gallego were sitting in the safety deposit vault room. They apologized to each other for everything that had happened, shared their sides of the story, and soon found themselves laughing together. On the other hand, Loco had fallen in love with one of the hostages. True to his erratic behavior throughout the mission, Loco took the girl to a secluded spot. He gave her a large sum of money from their stolen loot, telling her she could use it to pay off her debts. People later said he had stolen the money from a corrupt politician's vault, someone who had been hoarding wealth by stealing from ordinary people. The girl accepted the money, hid it in her clothes, and left the room, and stepped outside. Meanwhile, Uruguayo and his gang felt that things weren't going according to their plan. So Uruguayo came up with a new strategy. He called Pablo and demanded to speak with a government officer. When Pablo asked why, Uruguayo didn't answer, but instead threatened that if his demands weren't met, he wouldn't kill a hostage, but would instead leak all the data from Johns' hard disk to the world. This sent Pablo into a panic, as he was one of the corrupt police officers involved in John's shady dealings. Julio then called Ferran and told him he should meet Uruguayo's gang and resolve the matter himself. Left with no choice, Ferran agreed. When he met Uruguayo and Gallego, he promised to reduce their sentences in exchange for the hard disk. However, they told Ferran they wanted to use their stolen money to flee the country, not go to jail. They lied, claiming they had seen videos on the hard disk implicating Ferran and his associates. Uruguayo demanded that Ferran arrange a vehicle immediately to get them out of the bank. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sandra was being treated. Ferran's secretary visited her and asked questions about the gang. Sandra revealed the names of some of the robbers and mentioned that, since the gang members didn't trust each other, it wouldn't be hard to sow discord among them. On the other side, Ferran called Uruguayo and said he wanted to see the videos on the hard disk. When Uruguayo refused, Ferran grew suspicious, thinking he might be bluffing. Ferran said, "I know you don't have any videos." Then Ferran explained the entire situation to his boss, who decided to storm the bank and arrest the gang. The police forcefully opened the bank's door and quickly arrested all the hostages, putting them into a bus. But then it was revealed that the robbers had swapped clothes with the hostages. By the time the police realized this, the gang had already escaped. Moreover, all their stolen loot had been moved out through the tunnel, as the water flow had slowed down after the rain stopped. In the end, the entire gang comfortably fled the country and started their lives anew. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.